My name is Amy Hahn-Rischer. I'm with the Piedmont Park Conservancy. Today, I also have Stephanie Motter with me. She and I make up the marketing team for the Piedmont Park Conservancy. I also have Amanda Harris here from the Atlanta Humane Society, our presenter today, Mailey McLaughlin, and Christina Hill, who's also with the Atlanta Humane Society in the group. I worked for the Piedmont Park Conservancy, so I'm sure you're very familiar with Piedmont Park and hopefully love Piedmont Park. But the Conservancy is a nonprofit that takes care of Piedmont Park. A lot of people think that it's just tax dollars and it's a city park and that's how we're funded and how we're operated. But there is a group of people who are working hard 365 days a year to take care of Piedmont Park. We have to raise over $3.5 million each year to take care of this park, and we rely on over 10,000 hours from volunteers. One of the places that we take care of is the Piedmont Park dog parks. We get over 700,000 visitors at our Piedmont Park dog parks. And that's a lot of dogs and that's a lot of poop bags. So if you ever want to volunteer or you want to give, or if you're interested in something like our Young Professionals group, feel free to chat us or reach out to us by email or look at our website afterwards. So thank you so much for being here today. This is a collaboration with the Atlanta Humane Society. We're really excited to work with them to talk to you guys about bringing your dog to Piedmont Park and what does that look like. You might have a new puppy or a new dog into your family, or you might have had dogs in your family for a while and you're just looking for more information. I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. You are defaulted to be on mute if you're not a presenter, but please know that we welcome you to chat with each other and with us. Chat is offered at the bottom of your screen if you're looking at a desktop, and probably also on the bottom if you are on mobile. We're expecting the presentation to last about 30 to 40 minutes. We'll have questions and answers at the end, but if you want to go ahead and submit it for later, go ahead and drop it in the chat. Thank you again, and I'm going to pass it off to Mailey, today's presenter.
Thank you so much, Amy. Hi, my name is Mailey McLaughlin, and I am the Pooch Professor. I do dog training in and around the Atlanta metro area currently. However, I was the behavior and training manager for the Atlanta Humane Society for 21 very excellent years. I ran basic and intermediate classes and private lessons there, and it was a wonderful experience. I left there at the end of last year, and now I'm doing my own thing, but of course I still support the Atlanta Humane Society strongly, and they asked me to present, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some dog park stuff and canine body language and other things. So thanks for having me. As it was mentioned, if you have questions at any time, just go ahead and type them into the chat, and then when we get to that portion of the program, they'll read me the questions and I can answer those for you. So feel free to do those as soon as you think about them. Whenever I'm listening to a presentation, if I don't immediately write them down, I'll forget them for the end. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about three main things that you need to think about when you are considering using the dog park at Piedmont Park, or really any dog park, obviously. Those are basic canine body language and how to decode it. How to know if your dog is a good candidate for a dog park. Not all dogs are. And then a little bit about some dog park etiquette. If you're using the park, things that are good for you to know that will help you and others and their dogs have a good time in this particular environment. So we will cover all three of those things today. So beginning with canine body language. There are multiple things that dogs tell us with their bodies. Obviously, they can't tell us in words what they're thinking. So they show us how they're feeling, and they communicate a lot to us with body language. And if you have a dog, you know this, you've seen your dog exhibiting lots of body language. So it's pretty much their only language. And there are things that we want to look out for in terms of what's good body language, what's negative body language. And in the dog park sort of scenario, we're obviously looking for good body language. We want to make sure that the dogs that are in the park are having a good time and they're enjoying it and nobody's getting bullied and that sort of thing. So we're just going to touch on a few of those. The first one is a piece of body language that I'm sure you've seen before, and that's what we call the play bow. And I really like this picture. This is a very wonderful picture of a play bow here. You can see a couple of really great things. First of all, anytime you see a dog exhibit a play bow, what you need to understand is what this means is everything that's about to follow is about fun. Because sometimes dogs act in ways that look like aggression, even when they're playing. So if the dog play bows before it starts wrestling or running or growling or something with another dog, that's pretty much a sign to the other dog that, hey, this might sound a little crazy and a little bit much, but it's all in good fun, so let's play. So you see that the dog's elbows in this picture are almost touching the ground. They don't always do that, but this is a pretty exaggerated bow. Look at that loose, low tail. You can't see it wagging in a still picture, but it probably was. And then notice the ears. So in a drop-eared dog, sometimes it's hard for people to understand. Ears tell us a lot, and these are what I would consider forward ears, but they're not hyper-aroused forward ears. So this is a clear invitation for play. And this dog, sometimes you'll see their mouths open, they might be panting, or they might look like they're smiling. This particular dog doesn't have an open mouth. A tightly closed mouth would be a problem, but this particular dog is not showing that. So this is a really lovely pictograph of what good play looks like, or what a good invitation to play looks like. So when you see play bows, that's a really good thing. Now, talking about a little bit more about some good body language. Actually, let's go back and put it back on that. Sorry for that. That we don't have pictures of necessarily. We have some videos, so you'll be able to see some, and I'll point it out. But other good body language is loose and wiggly. When a dog is interacting with another dog, the more wiggling and curving and looseness that you see, the better it is. The more bent the elbows are, the better it is. The more the dog moves in general, the better it is. So you'll see play bows. You'll also see dogs not in a bow position, but they're still showing a really nice body language. And again, that low tail, you want to look at the base of the tail. So the base of the tail being even with or slightly below the level of the body is a good sign. If it's wagging furiously back and forth, that's even better. When the tail gets a little higher, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's where you're moving slightly away from good body language. But wiggly, silly, moving, bending of elbows, contorting themselves into an S shape, those sorts of things when they're playing with other dogs are really good. And like I mentioned before, forward ears in this manner as opposed to ears that are flat back on the dog's head, which would be more about fear. So, all right, now let's look at the negative body language slide. And actually, let me just explain that. I love this picture. It's really, really good. But this dog is exhibiting a little bit more fear than aggression or true negative body language. But you might see this in the park. And if you do see it, then it's definitely something to be aware of. So you'll see the piloerection, that's the hackles. When you see piloerection, what you need to understand is it could mean aggression, but normally it means uncertainty, especially when you see it at the base of the tail there. So a lot of times when I've been monitoring dog play groups, when a dog first comes into the group and it's being sort of examined by the other dogs, I see a lot of piloerection, which is just that dog sort of not sure, hey, what's about to happen here? And if things get fun and loose and wiggly really quick, that piloerection tends to go down. So that's almost always kind of right at the beginning, or whenever the dog starts to feel a little bit stressed. So a high tail, you see the base of the tail, and this dog's very high. That is a symptom or a signal to other dogs that this dog is aroused. And when we talk about arousal in a dog, think of it as just the preparedness to move, the preparedness to do something. So a highly aroused dog is about to engage in something. That could be chasing prey. It could be playing with a ball. It could be going after a cat in a negative way or something. So it's not necessarily a bad thing for a dog to be in an aroused state. And in a dog park, a lot of dogs are in some state of arousal because they're playing. But as you see the base of that tail start to go higher and higher, that's where you start getting into more, not necessarily troubling, but something you need to pay attention to. Because when dogs get over aroused, it can turn into a fight pretty quickly. So we want to be careful about over arousal. Some breeds get aroused very quickly and they have a hard time coming down from that arousal. So it's really good to know if your dog is one of those kind of dogs, because that can either cause a fight or other dogs can get freaked out by it. So we need to be careful. All right, we also have a stiff body with a squared stance. Anytime the dog is stiff, that's a potential problem. So when I ran play groups and training groups with multiple dogs, I always wanted to get the dogs bendy and wiggly as quickly as possible. If they come in stiff, it was the job of my helpers to make sure they got moving and everybody got moving really quickly in a good way. Stiffness is an indicator of uncertainty and anxiety, and it can become something negative pretty quickly. So it's the opposite of that lovely wiggly stuff we want to see. And then this dog you see has a closed mouth. In this particular picture, that closed mouth is indicating anxiety. The dogs tell a lot with their mouth, so the mouth is known as the commissure, and what you want to look for is ideally a wide open commissure. That generally is a good thing to look for. The tighter and closer in the dog's mouth gets, the more troublesome it becomes. This dog really doesn't have a hard, tight mouth so much, but if it got a little bit more stressed out, it could probably become that. So just some things to look for in a dog that comes into the park that you might notice. So we'll talk about whether or not your dog is suitable for a dog park, and so I'll kind of come back to that in a bit. But one thing you've got to understand about these pictures and about what you might see is that it's just snapshots, right? So dogs can change their state of mind pretty quickly. Dogs that like other dogs and enjoy play, they come in ready to go. Some dogs may come in a little bit nervous and they figure out everything's safe, then they're ready to go. You can look at a dog in one instant and see some negative signs, and then 2 or 3 seconds later, it's bowing and running again. So the more you observe dogs, the better you get at this. I've been watching dogs play with each other and interact with people and stuff for almost 3 decades now, and so it's something that I can see that fast, and regular people can't necessarily see it that fast, but the more you watch it, the more you'll notice. And so what I would suggest that you do is the next time you're in a setting with multiple dogs playing is see how many changes that you notice and how many pieces you notice. And one last thing before we go on, you can't just look at one piece. You can't just look at what the ears are doing or what the tail is doing or what the mouth is doing or the stance. You have to look at the gestalt, the entire dog. And again, it can change pretty quickly, but you want to look at everything at once. All right, so I believe the next slide we have a little video which shows, yes, this is a video that I took at the Humane Society a few years ago that shows a group of Humane Society dogs, and they're having a playtime. And these are dogs that we would call rowdy, or I used to call it slammy bangy play. So we'll watch this video, and I want you to look at tails, look at movement, look at all of the play, and then we'll talk about it. Now these dogs are dragging leashes. That's what you're seeing laying across them, because it was a safety issue at the Humane Society. So at the dog park, generally, this won't be happening. But what you'll notice here is there's a lot of running, which is good. A lot of chasing. So that fits in with our get them moving quickly. These dogs are all pretty well matched. Sometimes it's hard to see when one dog ends and the next one begins, right? So if you look in that middle dog I think is on his back, but for the most part you can see a lot of low tail carriage, or the midline of the tails are low on both the black dogs. You can see that, you can see it right there. So they keep their tails low, they keep moving. There's chasing. That dog was on the ground, now he's going to get this dog on the ground. That's what you want to see. You want to see a lot of nice back and forth. Now I've pinned you, now you've pinned me, now we're running. And the third dog joins in. There's a lot of close physical contact. Some dogs really like close physical contact. Typically, interestingly enough, the more muscular the dog is, the more they tend to like that. The more lean and fine and thin the dog is, the less they tend to like that slammy stuff. So, but that was a good video of them playing. They moved around a lot, they exchanged roles, and everybody had a nice wide open commissure and looked really good. So next I want to talk about whether or not your dog would be a good candidate for the dog park. And this can sometimes be hard for regular people to know and to understand. It's not a good idea to go adopt a brand new dog and take it to the dog park first thing. Dog parks can be great places, but they're not, you need to understand your dog a little bit before you take them there. So how would you figure that out? Well, when you take your dog for walks on the leash, what happens when he sees other dogs? Does he get wiggly and happy and silly and play bow when he sees them? Does he bark crazy? Does he get his hackles up and try to lunge after them? This is all information that can be helpful to you. And on-leash behavior is not always indicative of off-leash behavior, so that's kind of hard to know just in and of itself, but when you put it together with everything else, it can be helpful. And if not, you can contact any good trainer worth their salt can tell you probably what that dog's thinking about other dogs if you're not sure. So you want to gauge your dog's sociability around other dogs, and you may not have had a situation where dogs could play off leash in somebody's yard or something to gauge this out. So you can sort of tell on leash in a way. So this is just a really short clip here, and let me show it to you, and then we'll go back through it again and I'll show you. So this is two dogs that are meeting on leash, but there's a nice low tail there, low tail set on both of those dogs. And there's a little bit of bouncing. The brown dog was doing some bouncing. I'm going to have her replay that video one more time because it's so short. So good body language from both dogs there. A couple of things I want to point out right away. Dogs meeting face-to-face on leashes like this, actually not good, okay? So don't do this as a way to introduce your dog to other dogs, and I could do an entire other presentation about why you should not. But on my website, which there'll be a link at the end, there are some articles about how to introduce dogs and the right way to do it. So this is not the right way to do it. This was something happening at the shelter, and these dogs actually already knew each other, so we knew it would not be a problem. But on-leash greetings are not very helpful because the leash gives the dog, makes the dog more anxious and creates anxiety where there shouldn't be anxiety. So what else can you do? If you have a fenced backyard, or you know someone with a fenced backyard or a neutral place that's completely fenced in, then you can have dogs introduced there without the tight leashes. If you don't have that, then walks with your dog or anywhere you take your dog in public, just his reaction to other dogs can tell you a lot. And then again, you might go with an assessment by a professional. Something you can also try is to take your dog for a doggy daycare play date. A lot of times those places will do an assessment on dogs to let you know. And if your dog is suitable to play at a reputable doggy daycare, then chances are he's more suitable to play in other dog scenarios without being on the leash. So those are some things to think about and ways that you might test that. And obviously, the longer you've had your dog, the more information you're going to have when it comes to how sociable they are. Here's the thing. Not all dogs enjoy the rough and tumble play of a dog park. There are quite a few dogs I've met in my career that did not enjoy being at the dog park. It's not that they necessarily didn't like other dogs or were aggressive to other dogs, they just didn't like the typical style of play that tends to happen there. So you've got to gauge what's right for your dog, and if you've taken your dog to the dog park and he just kind of hung out by you and followed you around or seemed skittish or got slammed into and knocked over, whatever, and just doesn't seem to be having fun, then that's not a good place for him to go. He's telling you he's not enjoying it. So if you've tried it and it didn't seem to work out a few times, then that's pretty clear. It's probably not going to just get better on its own. So other things that you can do, again, we talked about meeting up with other dogs that you know are dog friendly. When you see your dog interacting with another dog, well, you can praise him and tell him he's a good boy. That's good information for him to have. You don't want to just open the gate of the dog park and let the dog go in unless you know. That can be pretty fraught. Dog parks have a lot of uncontrollable variables, and so you want to try to control as many as you possibly can, but once the dogs are loose in there, it can be hard to control. So ideally, you wouldn't take a completely untrained dog into the dog park. You wouldn't take a dog that's wound up and hasn't been exercised or worked with a little bit before, because you don't want that to just be an explosion of energy going in there, because that's going to rile everybody up. So we want to do what we can to try to figure that out. And again, you can get the advice of a professional if you like. If you've got video of your dog interacting with other dogs, sometimes we can tell a lot from that. So all right, so let's talk about things that are good about the dog park and things that the dog park can be helpful with. Of course, they help expend excess energy. It can be a fun place for your dog to run off leash. Leashes are a human construct, and dogs don't understand how leashes work until they're taught. And so they can absolutely be taught to walk nicely on leash, and you have to use leashes. It's a part of a dog's life, but having situations where they can run off leash safely, it is a good thing. It is, because they get to cover a lot of ground and investigate and do some things. So it can also help teach your puppy or your dog new social skills. So this is a video I took, and these are two puppies. I think they were about 6 months old. And they're of two different breeds and generally play styles. So you can see that the brown dog is a little more physical, and I think she can play that one again, probably. A little more physical, and he's a little bit more on top of the other dog. The other dog looks like a herding mix to me, and so looks like it would be more happy running and chasing, but they're both having a great time here. And there's a little I'm on top of you, now you're on top of me. You can see nice low tails. You can see both dogs engaging. When they break apart, they both go right back into the game as if they were having a great time. And just as a note on that, if you have a friend who has a dog and your dogs have been together and they've played and you feel like it's okay, the next time that you're hanging out with this friend and your dogs, let them play a little bit and then separate them. Just take them by their collars or call them and hold them back and force them to be separate for about 15 or 20 seconds. And then let them go again. Do they rush right back in and play some more? Or does one come running over and the other one kind of goes and tries to go this way? At any point, if you stop the play and you let one or the other go, do they re-engage? That's a pretty good sign. If you stop the play and they don't re-engage, or only one re-engages and the other one looks like he's not having fun, then that tells you a lot. So these guys, they were having fun. And puppies learn a lot from other dogs. In fact, if you have a young puppy and it can have some access to play with some adult dogs that are good with puppies, that is one of the most valuable things you can do, is get your pup around some adult dogs that will show him that there are limitations and boundaries that he can't cross. Other puppies will just teach your puppy how to play harder and more roughly, typically. So getting your dog around some nice adults is good. I could just watch that video all day. It's just so nice. So, all right. So we want to make sure that we avoid some of the negative things about dog parks. One of the things that is not good that happens in dog parks that I'm not a fan of is when people bring food or balls or other toys to a dog park. Those can cause some serious problems with dogs that may be resource guarders. And there have been some fights in dog parks I've seen over the decades that came from those sorts of things. So if your dog has resource guarding issues, then you want to be very careful to make sure that there are no toys anywhere in the park. So in this video, you'll see a little clip of a dog. He's got his ball, and he drops the ball, and another dog comes over, and it's kind of hard to see, but she'll show you a little still of it in a minute. Play that one again for me, Amanda. Thank you. So he drops it right there, and then he's like, oh, here's my ball. And the other dog's like, whoop, nope, you can't have it. And nothing bad happens. There's no fight, or I don't even know that he snarls or snaps, but he is quick to go after that ball. So if your dog is very ball possessive, and every time he drops the ball, he seems to be hovering over it and not wanting dogs to come near him, there's likely to be a fight happening. So if he can be in there and enjoy himself without any balls or toys, that's the best thing to do. You don't want to be bringing those in. Also, playing with balls and toys in the dog park is problematic for those reasons, but also this is a time for dogs to be social with each other and interact, and they're going to be much more likely to do that in a positive way if there aren't toys or balls involved in that. So when we would do play sessions, and we had something that we did at the shelter, it was a class for the shelter dogs, and we did some off-leash play as part of that class, but I always made sure there was no toys or balls in any part even available in the yard at all. So we always picked all those up because you just didn't know. Better be safe than sorry. So yeah, so right there in that pic, thankfully that brown dog was like not committed to that at all. So, and nothing happened there, but and if your dog's like that, you know, you're probably not nodding your head right now. Like you know, you've seen the dog do that in other situations. Hopefully not ever with you, but maybe. But you want to be careful. And if you've got a dog with resource guarding issues, resource guarding is actually quite fixable in most dogs, especially puppies. But it is not something that generally goes away on its own. So you want to get some help for that. So let's see. Also, you can't necessarily control what a dog's going to find in a park. So maybe there's no balls or toys, but what about sticks? What about rocks? What about whatever? People. Dogs guard people in the dog park. Dogs guard their owners in the dog park. And we'll talk a little bit about something you can do in the next little section here to make sure that you lessen the chance that's going to happen. But if your dog is very protective of you when you're out and about and other dogs come up, that's something you need to know about and be very careful about. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some etiquette, or as we like to say in the business, pediquette at the dog park. I'm full of them. All right, so let's see. I think what we're going to see next is Amanda's dog. All right, so this is a little video of an adult dog and a puppy interacting. And what you're going to see is puppy is pushy. And I want you to notice a couple of things that the puppy does here during this video, and then I'll tell you. So the puppy's trying to play. There's a little play bow, right? And see his tail's nice and low. He's sending some signals that are good. And the adult dog's saying, help me, please. Help me, please. Let's go back and watch that again. And then I think we've got a still shot of that as well. So both have nice low tails, but is the black and white dog play bowing? No. He's pretty much at this point trying to get away from that pup. He's not afraid of him, but he's like, you need to calm down, youngster. Okay? You whippersnapper, you. Now watch right here. Boom, boom, boom. 3 times in a row, the puppy tries to get the adult dog to play, and he uses his nose and his teeth to do that. He's doing a little nipping motion. and you notice that the adult dog has what we call whale eye. This is one of the negative signs that you want to notice in a dog that's anxious or afraid. The more white in the eyes that you see, the quicker it's going to go downhill. That's anxiety, and it's not good to see. So Bradford here was a little bit anxious about this interaction, and luckily he's a really nice dog and he didn't do anything negative to the pup, but this puppy was being a little over the top and a little pushy. The other thing is that this pup used his teeth, but we labeled it here as a muzzle punch. And what you'll notice, typically a muzzle punch doesn't necessarily involve the teeth. It can sometimes involve the incisors, which it did in this pup. That's the little tiny teeth in the front, where they'll just hit the other dog, or they'll sometimes do it to people, just hit them kind of hard with their muzzle and give a tiny, teensy little pinchy bite. And for this pup, it was strictly, hey, I want you to play with me. But for a puppy that age, that was a little forward. And I think Bradford was like, dude, that's a little forward for you. But he didn't correct the pup. Some adult dogs will correct, and a proper correction there over time, multiple times, probably would fix that, let's hope. But you want to watch for those pushy behaviors. So if you're in the dog park and there's a dog doing a lot of muzzle punching or too much nip and grab trying to get other dogs to play, that could be a sign. One thing about that, though, is that herding dogs like Border Collies, Australian Shepherds, Heelers, those kind of dogs, that's how they like to play. They like to bite and run. They like to nip and run away. Like, hey, tag, you're it, and run off. So for herding dogs, that can be kind of normal play, but usually that's around the rear of the other dog, and it's not so much a muzzle punch as it is just a attention getting thing, because that's how they herd. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I wanted to show you this video because mainly to make the point that get an adult dog around your puppy, especially if he's being pushy. That's super helpful. And if your dog is doing this in the dog park, constantly just annoying the crap out of other dogs, and they're doing this whale eye thing, it's time to go. It's time to go. If your dog is the recipient and is constantly doing a whale eye and acting like, oh my gosh, please save me, then your dog is telling you, I'm not really happy in this environment. So, and that may just be the energy that day, or it may just be the dog park in general. So you might want to go at calmer times, test it out a little bit when the park only has a few dogs in it, or you may not be able to use the dog park. So, all right, the next thing I want to talk about that's not fun is dogs that mount each other in the park. Ideally, I want the dog that is being victimized to correct the mounting dog, but sometimes that does not happen. So we see a group of dogs here, and you're going to see some humping behaviors here with the brown and white and brown dog. So that's a standover right there. Good. Amanda, can you go back and pause that? Let's see how good you are with the video. All right, it was a little bit before that part. A little bit more. Okay, right there. So that's not always a precursor to humping, but that is a pretty pushy move on most dogs. When they stand over, that dog's almost perpendicular to the other dog. Now, the brown and white dog is super chill, did not get upset. But if the brown and white dog was not super chill and didn't like other dogs super all on top of it, that's where you would have gotten a correction before the humping even started. So then he's like, okay, well, what if I try this? And you can see the brown and white dog like, dude, knock it off. He's not super forceful about it, but he does get him to quit. And then they do this little thing that I like to call stallion, which they rear up on their hind legs. And now it's sort of equal. So no harm, no foul there. It ended on its own. But if it hadn't, you would have needed to step in. So if the victim dog doesn't tell the other dog off in a decent way and things get back to normal quickly, then you need to stop that. Humping is very pushy behavior and it's super rude. And if it's allowed to just continue on and on, then the humper learns some terrible lessons and is going to get seriously hurt one day by a dog that's not going to put up with it. And then the humpy gets really freaked out and doesn't want to come back to the park, which is understandable. I mean, so we want to be careful about allowing that. Generally, when I'm in a group of dogs and I'm manning a group of dogs, I don't allow it. I allowed it in this video because it changed really quickly, and the victim got everybody moving and off of that, and the brown dog didn't do it anymore. So the other thing about humping, it's not a sexual thing in general, it's just a power thing. Dogs are generally doing it to sort of figure out where they fit and kind of who's in charge. And you might see a little back and forth with that. And so as long as it's just for a couple seconds and everything disperses, it's not a problem. But if it continues a long time, you might have to step in. Okay, so size. Let's talk about size differences. Piedmont Park, thankfully, has two different parks. They have a small dog area and a large dog area. You don't want to put small dogs that could be considered by the large dogs as prey into the large dog area. That's a no-no. That is a serious accident waiting to happen. And even if your small dog likes playing with big dogs, that's not the point. It has nothing to do with what your small dog enjoys or will put up with, and everything to do with what it's going to potentially trigger in a pack of dogs that are running around in a state of medium to high arousal. I've seen some really terrible things when this happens. So please, if you have small dogs, please use the small dog side of the park always. You never want to do that. Now, let's talk about this video that's here. These two dogs are obviously different in size because, I mean, we're talking about a gigantic dog. And the pity dog was actually a pretty big dog, but next to the Great Dane, not so much. He doesn't look like it. So you'll notice that the Dane seems to be overpowering the pit. Okay, so he's on top of him. He's standing over him. He's, doing a lot of neck biting. Okay, when it finishes, I'm going to have her play it again, and then I'm going to explain what you're actually seeing. So there, the pit gets up. Okay, so let's start that again. All right. So it looks, to the untrained eye, not so good, but look at those tails. Look at the Dane's tail. Look at the pit's tail, nice and loose. The pit has plenty of chances to get up and run off and doesn't do it because these guys are having a blast together. The Dane is actually doing what we call self-handicapping, which is he's playing nicely with a smaller dog on purpose instead of being completely overwhelming and overpowering. And the pit is self-handicapping by lying down on by his own choice underneath to play. So that interaction, even though those two dogs were very different in size, that was actually a really good interaction. So of course, neither of those dogs would go in the small dog area anyway, but the basic rule is size does matter. The closer in size and play style the dogs are, the better it's going to be. These dogs were not close in size, but their play style was exactly the same. So everybody had a really good time. You want to see a lot of back and forth. Good dog play involves a lot of back and forth. I'm on top, now you're on top. I'm being chased, now you're being chased. Now we're taking a break. Those sorts of things are really good to see. All right, the next thing I want to talk about here is I want you to watch this video, watch what happens to the brown dog when they let him into the park. So pretty immediately it becomes a huge clump of dogs. And the brown dog is the one on the ground. That's the one I'm talking about. He gets up, he tries to run away. The black dogs are like, nope, 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 nope. So the point of entry in the dog park is the most fraught. That's the place where most fights tend to happen. When a dog comes in, he's high energy and he starts running, or he immediately comes in and starts squaring off with the other dogs. So ideally, if somebody's trying to come in the dog park with their dog, you want your dog to come away from the gate. The better trained your dog is, the better it's going to be. Ideally, we don't want a bunch of dogs meeting other dogs right at the gate, because that's where it is the most dangerous, honestly. So in this scenario, it worked out fine. The dog got chased a little bit, but I think he actually enjoyed it. And then later on, the clump dispersed and everybody did fine. but they really were on him right in the beginning, and that's pretty normal. That tends to be what they do. So just be very careful. Of course, you never want to bring your dog in the park with a leash on, so you always want to make sure the leash is off of the dog, and any training collars you might have on the dog are off the dog. You can leave a regular collar on because sometimes you need to be able to grab the dog, but training collars, no. Leashes, no. So you want to take those off in that little vestibule. Make sure there's always one gate closed, always, always. And that's where you can take the leashes and training collars off. And then, if possible, get people to call their dogs away from the gate, or wait until something happens and they kind of disperse on their own, and then open the door and let your dog in. We want to try to avoid those clumping things at the gates. All right, and then the other thing that I wanted to talk about that you really want to be careful of doing is shown in this particular photo. First of all, we see people just standing around. This is really, really bad behavior, and that's what people do. They walk into the dog park and they stand there, or they talk to other people, or they drink their coffee, or they look at their phones. This is a time for your dog to be social and to enjoy some freedom. It's a time that you need to be watching your dog, though. You need to be paying attention to him, and you don't need to be standing around. You should be moving. Every single human in the park should be constantly moving. Do you need to run? No, don't run, but just walk. Walk around the space. You can walk around the outside of the space, or you can mill about through the space. Movement helps dissipate stress, and if people are standing in one place, usually there's a crowd of dogs around their feet, and guess what's going to happen? There's going to be a scuffle. So everybody should keep moving, which means, of course, that nobody should be sitting on benches. You sit on a bench in the dog park, guess what? You're going to have a lap full of big slobbery dogs very quickly. So if you have a situation where you can't stand for very long, then it's best to really not go put yourself into a large group of dogs and be sitting, because they're going to be all over you, and that can cause a fight as well. So ideally you want to be moving, and everybody in the park should be moving. And on this same note, young children that are going to be running around screaming, they're going to attract the attention of dogs, and they're going to get chased, possibly knocked down, and something worse could happen. So if children are going in the dog park, they should walk with you. You can hold their hand, or they can walk right near you, and everybody walks around together. We keep our voices low. We just move around, and you want to pay attention to what your dog is doing, but you don't want to be calling dogs, oh, come over here so I can pet you. Just ignore everybody else's dog. Pay attention to what your dog is doing. If your dog wants to follow you around the whole time and doesn't want to play, then let him. But if that's how he acts every time he goes to the park, then why even bother taking him? So don't stand around. Don't be staring at your phone. Put your phone away so that you can devote your attention to being in this nice place, the outside, green grass, lovely day, your dog having a great time, but you actually paying attention to him in a overseeing sort of way. And make sure children are apprised of those rules before you go in, because kids that run around and scream will attract the attention of dogs. And every dog in that park individually may be the nicest dog on the planet, but if they get ramped up and riled up, then they become a pack, and that's where bad things can happen. So please be careful with that. Obviously, the main reason you want to pay attention to your dog is to pick up his poop. For goodness sakes, we cannot leave poop in an area where people are going to step in it. It's gross, it's unsightly, it's unsanitary. Pick it up. Pick it up and dispose of it properly. So we pay attention so that we can make sure that we do that, and also that our dog's having fun and that our dog's not bothering or terrorizing anyone else. And like I said, if I'm in a dog park, I don't pay attention to other people's dogs. I don't try to pet them. I don't call them over to me. If they come into my space and they're sending me signals, I'll probably talk to them and say something, but otherwise I just keep moving, and I randomly call my dog to me. The dog comes in, take it by the collar for a second, and then I let it go play again. That's just what we do. Dog comes in, yay, good dog, take it by the collar and let it go play, okay? Otherwise, I'm not ever standing around, and I'm certainly not doing anything to attract the dog's attention. Okay, so ideally, dog parks would be much, much safer if people would do this. So I don't like the congregating around. All right. That, I believe, is the bulk of the presentation. So we will take some questions, and I think I've seen a few questions pop up. So if you want to tell me what some of those are, I'll try to answer those.
So as of right now, we have no questions in the chat. So if people want to drop questions in there, go ahead. We have about 5 to 10 minutes.
I'm just going to scroll through these really quick, just the comments people have made, and I'll see if there's anything I need to ask. Sometimes owners are the real problem at dog parks. Yes, unfortunately, that can be a problem. Honestly, I believe it's because they just don't know any better most of the time. What looks like resistance is often a lack of clarity. So I want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but you're right. Most dogs seem to handle it pretty well, and people tend to be the bigger part of the problem, but even for them, most of the time it's just because they don't know any better. I mean, you may not have understand you should walk around in the dog park until I just said it. So until you know, you don't know. And when you know better, you do better. People who don't monitor their dogs, yep. People think, oh, this is just time for Fluffy to just do whatever and I don't have to pay any attention to her. No, you should be paying attention. You should have a really good recall, which is come command, and you should be able to call your dog to you and to let it go back to play multiple times. That would be so excellent if everyone could do that at the same time. All right, distracted people. Hilarious when dogs hump other dogs. Yeah, not hilarious. Not hilarious at all.
We have a few new questions at the very bottom.
Okay, hang on, well, I'm scrolling. How do I get my dog back on the leash? Short answer, you need to train it using a leash until you can use lighter and lighter and longer leashes until you can practice around a bunch of distractions before you let it off leash in the dog park. So it takes some work. Dogs can learn to come even from other dogs, even with the biggest distractions imaginable, but it takes work. It's not something they just know how to do. So the short answer to that is prepare before you go in the dog park. There's lots of treats, lots of great stuff. Make sure the dog understands that coming to you makes great things happen. It doesn't just mean clip on the leash and we're going home. That's why a lot of dogs don't want to come in the dog park, because that means fun over. So you've got to teach come so that it doesn't mean fun over. And it's doable, it's absolutely doable. All right. So socialization, if you're not sure how they'll do with other dogs, the best thing I can tell you to do is find a reputable doggy daycare and go do an assessment and do a day of play. And the people there are equipped to tell you whether or not it was good. Now, every group is different. Daycares are generally more monitored than dog parks are. So just because the dog does well at daycare doesn't mean he'll do great in a dog park, but it will at least give you a general idea. Okay, so if at the daycare they said the dog hid in the corner and hid behind people and had a horrible time and snapped at everybody, then you know you shouldn't take him to a dog park. So that's probably what I would consider the best way. Or if you've got friends with dogs that are friendly and happy and you can get them together in controlled ways, then over time you can kind of tell that way. All right. Where to find a good trainer? So word of mouth is the best way to find someone to help you with training. Absolutely. Talk to your vet, talk to people at the daycare if you use that, talk to your friends with dogs. Heck, I've known people who will just see somebody walking down the street with a well-trained dog and just stop them and say, hey, how'd you get that dog trained? Who do you like? You can look on apps like Nextdoor. You can read reviews. Some trainers have reviews that are available, some don't. But word of mouth is really the best way to find a good trainer, and there's lots of really great trainers in this city. I know some of them, they're really wonderful, and if other people are recommending them, then that's generally a good sign. You can go online, you can just Google people, but that doesn't really tell you much about them. So, and people can certainly make themselves out to be better than they are on the internet. So word of mouth is good. All right. Ooh, this is a really good question. How old should a puppy be before taking it to the dog park? My personal rule is 6 months or older. Now, there's something to be said. Certainly, puppies need to be socialized in many ways before 6 months. So I'm not saying you should delay socialization, but in the dog park scenario with all those uncontrollable variables, it can be really hard to make sure it's a positive experience, especially for young pups. So I wouldn't do it before the age of 6 months as a general rule. And I always put a little asterisk by that because there are always exceptions. But you might try maybe going on a weekday or something when there's only 2 or 3 dogs in there. That may be a way to sort of skirt around that. I certainly wouldn't go on a weekend when there's a bunch of dogs in the dog park and thrust a 4 or 5 month old puppy in there. So 6 months is kind of my rule, 6, 7 months. And again, it also just depends on how the dog is general. Is it normally a timid pup? Is it normally an outgoing pup? Those are things to take into account. And again, if you're not sure, talk to a trainer or even try the daycare option first and see. Some daycares, I think 6 months is the minimum they'll do. I don't know for sure, but you might try that. But super young puppies in that big of an environment with so many dogs and all those uncontrollable variables, I wouldn't do that. You need to socialize. But socialization is not just how will he do with other dogs. Socialization is exposing the puppy to the world, everything the pup's going to encounter in the world, sights, sounds, smells, surfaces, people wearing hats, just pretty much everything. It's about sort of inoculating the puppy to the things that he will meet later so that he is not scared or nervous by them. And other dogs is part of that, but it's not the biggest part of that. So if that has to come a little bit later with the other dogs, that's okay. All right. Okay, so no puppies under 16 weeks are even allowed in Piedmont Park Dog Park. So good to know. I'm sorry I didn't know that before to tell you that.
No problem at all.
That's good to know. I agree with that. I think you should make that 20 weeks, but that's just me. Just kidding. All right. Same age, let's see, does the same age, I think maybe you meant apply to daycare. I would go by what the daycare rules are, so call them and tell them the age of your pup. They may have certain rules where they won't allow pups under a certain age. So I would go with that. You need to expose your puppy to 100 new things in 100 days. Yes, I would agree with that. That is an excellent idea. All right. All right, I got time for one more question if you get it up there super fast. Oh, I can suggest lots of books. Somebody say, can you suggest a book? That's a whole other presentation right there. But yes, my favorite book on dog puppy training, expectations for a dog and puppy is called My Smart Puppy. The authors are Brian Kilcommons and Sarah Wilson. I can write that in the chat in just a second. I will do that. It is not just for puppies. I used to recommend it to all of my class students. It is a wonderful book. These folks are really, really smart. They've been around a long, long time doing this. Some great things you can do that will work for just about every puppy or dog, and just really good things to know. So if I had to pick one book, it would be My Smart Puppy, and I'm putting it in the chat right now. Sarah Wilson is one of my mentors, and she's a dear friend, and she knows a ton about dogs. Okay, there it is, and it's available. Amazon has it. It's available all over the place. So it's been out for about 12 years now, but it's still my favorite book. So.
Well, Mailey, thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation. I learned a ton.
Oh, good.
This is so, and I can't wait to share more of this information, either, through social or through, something in the future that we can do. This was really valuable. So we thank you. Thank you everyone else for joining us today. You'll get an email from us in the next day or two, and we hopefully can include a recording as long as everything turned out for us. So thank you again. Thank you for joining us at the Piedmont Park Conservancy and Atlanta Humane Society, and enjoy your night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.